Hello, and welcome to the first lesson of Math 100. Lesson number 1 is about fallacies, which are faulty arguments. So we start with logic because logic is really a foundational element of mathematics. And so we are going to apply logic in a way that would sort of make sense in the real world. And that's our first lesson. All right, so let's get to it. Okay. So lesson number 1, make sure you have this handout as you take notes while you watch this recording. The title or the topic of lesson number 1 is fallacies. The question or questions, what are fallacies and how do you distinguish between the different types of fallacies? What are fallacies? And what types are there? Okay. Introduction, fallacy. Let me just write down fallacy. A fallacy is a faulty argument to prove a point. Now, the conclusion may actually be true, okay? But if you go there by way of a faulty argument, first, nobody has to believe that. And then number 2, people will figure out that your logic is not correct, and that could discredit everything else you say. All right, so we are going to cover 10 types of fallacies. All of them appear in the textbook in the very first section. Actually, some of them may not be in the book, and I will be using my own terms as well. So there may be a slight difference between what we write here and what you read in the textbook. All right, number 1, we have, oh, by the way, the faulty argument, it could be, you could say it's deceptive. And it could be intentional or unintentional. Sometimes these things are done without the person's evil purpose or whatever. Okay, so number 1 is this thing called personal attack. My computer is getting a little slightly delayed. Okay, so a personal attack is, by the way, the personal attack sounds like, hey, you're stupid or you're an idiot or something, but it's not that. In this context, personal attack, which is often called by its Latin name, ad hominem, and so that means you're not attacking the statement made by somebody, but you're attacking the person making the statement, regardless of whether the statement is right or not. Usually trying to discredit the person who made the statement in the area that is not related to what the statement says. Okay, so for instance, here's an example. I don't believe anything that the man says because he smokes. Okay, now smoking is, I think most of us agree that smoking is a bad thing, but you don't believe or not believe what somebody said on the basis of the person, whether the person smokes or not. Okay, so if a smoker tells you that 2 + 2 is equal to 4, you are not going to say, well, I don't believe that because he smokes, right? So it is attacking the person's character and not the argument itself, and that is called a personal attack or ad hominem. It comes in different things, right? So by the way, this statement here, the weakness or the flaw that the person you're claiming should have nothing to do with the credibility of the statement. Okay, so if it's a scientific claim, and if, for instance, if somebody says, I don't believe that the scientific statement made by this person because this person has no knowledge of science, it's really not a personal attack, because if a person who is completely ignorant of science should not be making an incredible scientific statement, right? So an ad hominem or personal attack is one fallacy in which this fault of the speaker really has nothing to do with the area in which the claim is made, okay? All right, so that's number 1. Number 2 is appeal to ignorance. Let's see if I can write it better here. Appeal to ignorance. All right, so what does that mean? Here's an example, okay? An alien must live somewhere out there because no one has proved they cannot exist. And so what is that again? Yeah, so we're saying that because we don't know, anything is possible. And well, that's possibility. That may be true, but it may not be true. You cannot make a claim just because um, nobody has proved it cannot happen. All right, so this is a claim that something must be true because it has not been proved false. Okay. So for instance, one can say a dinosaur must exist because nobody has proved that dinosaurs can't exist. That kind of thing. Okay. So you could say, for instance, I mean, this you can treat these, since this is a math class, you can treat this like an algebraic statement. What do I mean by this? Okay. So number one, for personal attack, you can say, I don't believe the statement made by X because X has a character flaw. Right? That's number one. Number two, you could say something like this. I believe X because X has not been proved wrong. Okay, so that's called an appeal to ignorance. Number three, appeal to authority. All right, so an example is, so you're now appealing to some sort of an authority. Just because somebody famous or somebody with an expertise said something, it must be true. Now, it is okay to say that's likely to be true, okay? So in other words, if, let's say if your chemistry professor says that, something, okay, something about chemistry, you probably want to believe that because the chemistry person probably knows chemistry and it is his or her duty to teach you truth about chemistry. So that's not an appeal to authority. But if you say everything this particular person says is true and therefore I believe that, that would be, that can be an appeal to authority. So here's an example, okay? An ESPN expert, of course, a sports journalist, said the Dodgers are certain to win the World Series this year. Therefore, they must win the World Series this year. Okay, now again, this person may be an expertise. He or she has some sort of authority. But remember, these experts could disagree with each other. And therefore, you can't just take a person's statement and say it must be true because that person is an authority or an expert in the area. So claiming something is true because someone with an authority has said so. Okay, so let's say I know an uncle who happens to have taken a couple of science classes in college. And since he has taken 2 science classes in the college and he says that global warming doesn't exist or does exist, whichever, well, that doesn't make the statement true or false. Okay, but if you say, well, because I know the guy, he's really, really smart, that is called an appeal to authority. Remember, authorities can disagree with each other, which is why this is a faulty argument. Number 4, this one is interesting and it's very prevalent. Okay, so this is called false dilemma. D-I-L-E-M-M-A. All right, so this is sometimes called limited choice. So what is a faulty dilemma or a false dilemma or a limited choice? Okay, this is to falsely assume or make a supposition that only 2 choices are possible and one is not true and therefore the other must be true. Okay, so you have this X or Y and you make a statement or you make an assumption that one of them has to be true and you show that X is not true and therefore Y must be true. Okay, what am I talking about? Here's an example. Oh, you don't drink coffee, so you must be a tea drinker. Well, the truth is there are people, I don't know why, but there are people who don't drink tea or coffee. So you cannot claim that just because a person does not drink coffee, that person must like tea. Okay, it is possible that they may not like either one, right? So here is a hidden assumption that either you're a coffee drinker or a tea drinker. Everybody has to be one of those. And since you're not the first, you must belong to the second group. And the argument falls apart in the assumption that you're assuming that, one of those has to be true. Now, this is, like I said, this is quite popular and sometimes it's subtle because we often make this kind of assumption without knowing that we are already making the assumption. Concluding something is true on a faulty assumption that only two possibilities exist. Okay, so I could make a statement like this. You know what? You work so hard. In fact, you're a workaholic, okay? And you should spend time at home. So quit your job so you can spend your time at home. Well, the underlying assumption there is that you work all the time and are workaholic, or you spend quality time with your family. Okay, isn't there a sort of a balanced middle? Yeah, of course there is. Okay, so you can't say, hey, don't work all the time. Just quit your job and work at home, or the other way around. Okay? We seem to take extreme positions. I mean, you can call X a certain political party and Y the other political party, and sure, there are a certain middle ground, and that's called a compromise. But if you're on this extreme or this extreme, and you say there are no other choices, that is called a limited choice or faulty dilemma or false dilemma. Number 5, circular reasoning. This is also fairly common if you pay attention to how people talk about things. Sometimes it's called begging the question. Now, what do I mean by this? Okay, so here's an example. You know what? What you're doing, what you're saying is illegal. Well, what do you mean what I'm doing is illegal? Well, because it's against the law. Well, how is it that it's against the law? Well, because it's illegal. What's the definition of illegal? Well, it's against the law. Okay, and so if you say that's against the law because it is illegal, well, you're not really making an argument. You're saying the same thing in a different way. So this is called a circular reasoning because illegal and law are the same thing, right? So A is true because of B, and you say B is true because of A. See, I mean, that's called the circular reasoning because there's a circle, right? So it is the fallacy in which concluding someone, it is a fallacy in which you are concluding something or statement on the basis of another claim, which is basically an equivalent, or basically that depends on the conclusion itself that you are making, right? And so, hey, you are late. Well, why am I late? Well, because look, you didn't come in time. So why didn't I come in time? Well, because you're late, that kind of students. The book actually has a great example, a student saying, hey, look, I shouldn't be getting a C in this class because I'm an A student. And the teacher will say, well, what do you mean you're an A student? You just earned a C. So, well, yeah, but I'm an A student. Well, what's the definition of an A student? An A student is a person who just gets all A's, right? So if that person gets a C, that student is not an A student. So that will be an example of circular reasoning. Okay, let's do one and then we'll take a little break. One more and take a little break. Number 6 is also fairly common. This is called post hoc. Post means later, and so post hoc is also called a false cause. This is an interesting one. Well, I mean, most of them are. An example is this. Look, I got sick last week when it got very hot, very quickly. So the heat made me sick. Right? So A happened, and then B happened. And because A happened right before B happened, therefore A must have caused B. You see that? Okay, and you see why this is a faulty argument? You're claiming that when two things happen sequentially, one, A happens, two, B happens, then the first one must have caused the second thing. Now, sometimes it is true, right? So you don't sleep for days, and then one day you collapse, okay? Your lack of sleep came before your collapse. Did the lack of sleep cause your collapse? Probably, okay? But again, I say probably because you don't have a definitive answer here. Just because A happened before B happened does not certainly prove that A is the cause for B. And so when somebody claims that, it's called the post hoc or false cause fallacy. Okay, so we have covered the first 6, And in the next video, we'll take care of the backside, which is the last four. And then we'll go into, I will show you what to do after that.